Hello my dear grade 8 students. So we are about to start a fresh new chapter, a fresh new lesson, right? So this is the 13th lesson in your grade 8 science syllabus. So the 13th lesson is reflecting about how to preserve food or the food preservation. Now, food preservation means actually, I'm going to give you some brief about the lesson about the food preservation. So you know that we consume food in order to get our nutrition. But there is a small bit of a problem. The problem is that if you take food, there are some certain types of food which we cannot keep for a longer time period. Mainly because of the action of microorganisms, these food items, these food types would tend to spoil, right? So upon spoiling food, we won't be able to consume them, right? For an example, if you take a bowl of rice, right? When you take a bowl of rice, let's imagine that we cooked it in the morning. So if we cooked it in the morning, we have to consume it within the day, most probably within the morning or else at the afternoon time period. If we kept it for if we kept that thing for a longer time period, I mean like if we are going to consume it in the evening, most probably you won't be able to eat it because the texture, right, and the taste and the smell also is going to be different from the original state. Mainly it won't be able to consume because of those bad odor, bad smell, the slimy nature and those kind of things. It's because that food is tending to spoil because of the action of microorganisms, right? It's tending to spoil because of the action of microorganisms mainly. So my dear children, it's important to preserve food. What do you mean by preserving then? So preserving means here we are keeping food for a longer time period by removing the factors necessary for the growth of microorganisms. Factors like moisture, right? We can remove up to a certain extent, we can remove. So by removing out those factors, we can keep food items for a longer time period. So there are several ways of doing these things, preserving food. We'll be discussing these things later with the lesson. So I just gave you a brief what does this preservation means. Okay. So food preservation or preservation of food means actually here we are keeping these food items, food types for a longer time period, right? So that we can consume these things when we need. Okay. So what's the purpose of using these food items when we need it? For a simple example, you know that we won't be able to consume especially fruits within off seasons, right? There is a season which the fruits is coming. Okay. Let's take jackfruit. So you can preserve jackfruit. You can preserve jackfruit. So by that way, you can consume jackfruit even in the off season. However, it won't be similar to the jackfruit that you are going to consume during the season time. But you know that we can consume that thing in the off season time period as well, if you can preserve it. Okay. So like that way, there are several advantages of preserving food. So within this lesson part, we'll be discussing each and every those advantages and also some disadvantages as well. So those things will also be discussed, right? And also we'll be discussing what are the methods of food preservation, why do we need to preserve food, right? And what are the traditional methods of food preservation, which the ancient time period, during the ancient time period, what are those people have used? Our ancestors. They also preserved food. We'll be discussing about those traditional methods, right? Most of the times these traditional methods are the ones which are being moderated during our, during this era, during this technological era, right? The earlier or the traditional methods are being developed. Same procedure is being done, but however it has been developed to a certain extent. So then after that we'll be discussing modern methods and so on, right? So within this lesson, mainly we'll be discussing about how to preserve food, and mainly what is the use of preserving food. So my dear children, this is a brief introduction for our lesson, the food preservation. So now let's see what are the other contents within the lesson. So under the food preservation, we'll be discussing first of all the need of food preservation. The need of food preservation. Like I said earlier, why do we need to preserve food? What is the importance of it? So we'll be discussing that thing under the need of food preservation, right? Under the need of food preservation, we'll be discussing about the need of preserving food. What's the importance? Why do we need to do it? Okay. Then food preservation methods. After that, we'll be discussing about food preservation methods. Mainly we are focusing over there about the traditional food preservation methods and modern, right? Modern food preservation methods. Okay. What are the methods that our ancestors used to preserve food, save food? And what are the new trends or new technologies that we used in preserving food? Okay, traditional and modern ones, right? Then we'll be discussing about food preservatives. Food preservatives and food additives, right? Both the things will be discussed. So food preservatives and food additives are being added to the food in order to keep these food items for a longer time period. Okay, by adding different types of chemicals, we can keep the food for a longer time period by reducing the action of microorganisms. So we'll be discussing about those additives and preservatives, especially under the food preservative part. Okay, then we'll be discussing about the advantages and disadvantages of food preservation. So what are the advantages of food preservation and what are the disadvantages of food preservation? There are disadvantages as well, right? Preserving food is a good thing, but however, there are disadvantages as well. Okay, there are advantages and as well as disadvantages. So we'll be discussing about those advantages and disadvantages of food preservation under the advantages and disadvantages of food preservation part. Okay. Then finally, my dear children, we'll be discussing about information in a label of a food package. If you take a packeted food, right, or else tinned food, canned food like salmon, right, or else pea, right? If you take those kind of things, you know that those things are being canned or tinned. So there are certain things that should be included within the package. There are several details. Mass, how much is the mass? How much is the, how much is the price? Okay, the price. Then after that, the expiration date, manufacture date. Okay, then what are the ingredients, right? So like that, there are several things. There are several things that should be printed on a label of a packeted food item. Okay, a packeted food item, there are certain things that should be labeled. Definitely they should be there. Okay, it's a law. By the law, by the consumer department, right? by each and every consumer department in each and every country. The sellers or the manufacturers are being instructed to print these things, especially their price, their ingredients, manufacture date, expiration date, and there are several things. So we'll be discussing about the information that can be observed within a packeted food, okay, within packeted food at the final lesson part of our food preservation lesson. So my dear children, this is a simple introduction and a small bit of a brief on the things that we are on the things that we are going to discuss during this lesson. So I hope that you will stay with me till the end of the lesson to get a knowledge about this food preservation process. So let's move on with the first and foremost topic related to the lesson. So it's reflecting about the need of food preservation. Need of food preservation. Why do we need to preserve food? What is the purpose of preserving food? So we'll be observing the need of food preservation at our first and foremost subtopic related to this lesson. Right then, so a point is given here. Food spoils mainly due to the growth and action of microorganisms on food. So I told you that at the beginning, I told you that this is the main reason for the spoilage of food. What is the main reason? The first and foremost, or the main reason is the action of microorganisms. The growth of microorganisms within the food. That is the main reason behind the spoilage of food. If you can reduce the action of microorganisms, if you can reduce the growth of microorganisms within the food item, then you can reduce, right? Then you can reduce, or then you can keep this food item for a longer time period, okay? Or else you can reduce the spoilage of food up to a certain extent. However, at a certain time, it's going to spoil. I mean, we can't keep it for lifetime period. Okay. However, at a certain time, it's going to spoil. But my dear children, you can delay the process of spoilage. Okay. You can delay it. Let's imagine that a food item is going to spoil within 1 day. Then by preserving it, we can keep for like at least a week. Okay, at least for like week we can keep it by the process of preservation. However, my dear children, there is a disadvantage. The main disadvantage is after preserving food, we won't be able to get the same taste as the previous. There are like complications like that. So it's a main disadvantage. But however, if you take food, even though the taste is getting changed, we can keep it for a longer time so that we can consume it on a later date. Okay, so the main action behind the spoilage of food is the action of or the growth of microorganisms on food. Okay, microorganisms are going to grow on food, so thereby food is getting spoiled. That's the main reason for the spoilage of food. Okay, right. So food spoils mainly due to the growth and action of microorganisms. Examples given. Coagulation of milk. Coagulation of milk means, now you know that milk is normally in the form of liquid. However, when the time is going to pass by, and you know that the color of milk is very white color. Okay, very white color means it is actually showing a good white color, white nature. But however, when the time is going to pass by, like not in days, but after few hours being passed by, when passing few hours, only for few hours is enough. This food is going to turn into a semi-solid kind of a state. Okay, a semi-solid kind of a state, right? So that process is called as the coagulation of milk. The coagulation of milk mainly happens because of the action of microorganisms. And also upon the coagulation process, my dear children, there is another risk. the color and the taste and the smell of the milk is also getting changed. Okay, from white color it is turning into pale yellow. Okay, from white to it is getting converted to pale yellow, and the smell, a very bad odor, a very bad smell is going to come out. Okay, and if you taste it, you won't be able to drink it at all, right? Definitely you're gonna vomit if you taste it at that stage. Okay, definitely you are going to vomit because it has a terrible taste. So all of these changes are going to occur because of the coagulation of milk. So the coagulation of milk mainly happens because of the action of microorganisms. Microorganisms are turning this milk into a different kind of a form, different kind of a liquid. Actually, it is type of a semi-solid, right? So my dear children, this is what happens to the milk if you keep it for a longer time period, right, exposed to normal environmental conditions. All the microorganisms are going to feed on that milk, and upon production of different enzymes and different chemicals by them, these things are going to spoil. Spoiling means change in the texture, nature, or any other kind of a physical property. So upon change in those things, we won't be able to consume that. Okay, so that is what do you mean by simply coagulation of milk. Then if you take bread, now here you can see it. This is original milk before the coagulation or before the spoilage. As you can see it, it has a creamy color, a creamy white color, right? And it is like, like it's very tasty. By looking at the figure, we can say that, right? It's very tasty. It's going to be very tasty, as you can see it with the figure. But however, if you check the second one, it has a pale yellow color, brownish, like related to a brownish color. By just looking at it, you can see that it's going to be a terrible one, right? Even you keep it near your nose, then you won't be able to breathe, because a very bad odor is going to come out. Okay, so this is the difference between the fresh milk and spoiled milk. This is what do you mean by coagulation. So like if you dip something into it, then you can see solidified milk particles within the solution in which the spoiled milk in a sample of spoiled milk. Okay, so you just need to take a pen or pencil or something like that, a small bit of one, and you insert it and get it out. So a layer of solid milk can be observed. That's what do you mean by the coagulation, right? It's getting turned into a semi-solid kind of a structure. So we won't be able to consume it. The coagulation of milk, upon the coagulation of milk. Then the growth of mold on bread. So here you can see mold is like kind of a fungus. Here you can see it. This is a fresh bread slice, and this is a bread slice which been spoiled. So as you can see here very clearly, the color, appearance, and also the nature has been changed completely. Okay, so if you smell it, you won't be able to, right, keep your nose near to it at least, because it's going to give out a very heavy or very bad odor, right? So my dear children, this is spoilage of bread upon creation of mold. Okay, it's type of a fungus. Then the meat. So as you can see here, spoilage of fish and meat. See, you can see. So if you take fish and meat also going to spoil. Upon spoiling fish and meat, their texture mainly getting changed with the smell. A slimy texture, a slimy nature can be observed, right? And the smell is also going to be worse, right? A terrible smell would come. And my dear children, if you take the nature of the meat and fish, it's going to be very, like slimy, and as well as the hard nature of the food, like hard nature of the meat and fish is definitely going to change. It's kind of a liquid, it can be observed in a kind of a liquid form. Okay, it can be observed within a kind of a liquid form. Like when you push it down like this, you can clearly observe, a hole like of thing is getting created within the surface. Okay, if you push it like this, okay, it will keep it in the same way by keeping a hole like thing on the surface of the meat or fish, right? So upon that, you won't be able to consume it. If you consume it, then you will be getting definitely some diseases. Okay, so spoilage of meat and fish. And also if you take the color, color of this fish and meat is also going to change upon their spoilage. Okay, the color is also going to change, and the look or the appearance, that fresh look, is also going to disappear, right, creating out a like a brownish nature, right? So then after that, fruits are given. So coconut oil, then here the next one is given, coconut oil going rancid. So rancidity can be observed within the coconut oil. Okay, means that there are like solid particles which are coming to the top. Okay, and the taste is getting changed. And also if you take coconut oil, when you smell it, like a different kind of a smell can be observed. That's how these oils are going to rancide. Okay, rancidity process. That is also happening because of the action of microorganisms. And there are other types of food which are given here, mainly fruits. So as you can see here, this is a fresh banana, well ripened banana, but after few days, if they are not being consumed within the time period, you can observe this kind of a structure within the banana. Their fresh nature is going to disappear, and black color spots can be identified, and the taste is also going to differ, right? Odor is also going to differ, right? And the nature, appearance is going to differ from fresh new ones. This is tomato. Then tomato is also the same, right? As you can see here within the figure, their color is getting changed, nature is also getting changed, texture and the smell, all of these factors are getting changed upon the spoilage. So my dear children, the main action or the main reason behind the spoilage of food is because of the action of microorganisms. So we can't keep food for a longer time period. That is the main importance of preserving food as well. Because without food we can't live. So it's important to save these food items as much as possible, so that we can consume these things in the future as well, right? And also it's important to preserve food, and also it's important to not to waste food also. So wasting of food is also getting minimized upon the preservation process. Okay, so let's move on with the other things contained within the lesson. So in addition to the microbial activity, food is also spoiled by the damage caused by microorganisms such as weevils, grain borers growing on the fruit. So in the earlier case, we discussed about microorganisms, So here it's not microorganisms, my dear children. In addition to the microbial activity, food is also spoiled by the damage caused by macroorganisms. Macroorganisms, not microorganisms. Macroorganisms. So macroorganisms means organisms that we can observe through our naked eye. Earlier it was microorganisms. I told you that action of microorganisms is the main reason behind the spoilage of food. However, this time the action of macroorganisms is also kind of a reason to spoil food. Who are the microorganisms that are going to spoil food then? Examples given: weevils, right? Weevils are going to, spoil mainly grains like paddy, green gram, those kind of things. Okay, weevils. Then grain growers growing on the fruit. Okay, grain growers. So these kind of macroorganisms are also going to spoil food. Actually, they are not going to spoil food. However, those organisms are also going to help for the microorganisms to spoil food. So we can consider that thing as a main cause. Okay, main cause. There are some macroorganisms which are going to help to spoil food for the microorganisms. Main action is because of microorganisms. But however, you know that if you take paddy seeds, green gram seeds, it's difficult to, take the fleshy part of the seed, as it is very tough. But however, weevils and these grain growers would be able to pierce the outer skin, outer layer, and it would be easy to microorganisms to enter that fleshy part and to eat it, to consume it. So by that way also food getting spoiled, especially seed types of ones. Okay, so there are macroorganisms who are going to spoil food. And in the earlier lesson, I think you could remember, we discussed about the life cycles. So under that, if you take fruits, we discussed about the fruit fly. So you know that fruit fly is going to lay eggs within the ripened fruits. So these ripened fruits are also going to be spoiled because of that action. Because after piercing, microorganisms would directly enter to the fruit item. Okay. So by that way also, these things are getting spoiled. So there are several macroorganisms as well. There are several macroorganisms who is going to support the spoilage of food. Okay, like weevils, fruit flies, rice borers, and so on. Okay, that's in addition. Addition means the main reason behind the spoilage of food is microorganisms. However, there are some macroorganisms who are going to help. Right then. So once again, examples given: weevils spoiling cereals and pulses. Right? Pulses such as paddy, gram and green gram. Then here, as I said earlier, especially these are going to spoil pulses and grain types ones, weevils, right? Actually, they are consuming those things. So after they are going to consume, we won't be able to consume those things. Okay, right? Then the next one given: food, especially vegetables, fruits and cereals, become unsuitable for consumption due to not following the correct technological methods during processing them. So especially, my dear children, if you take vegetables, fruits and cereals become unsuitable for consumption due to not following the correct technological methods during processing them. So in order to, if you take food items, we should have to follow, there are several technological things. There are certain things that we need to follow in processing them. If not, definitely they will spoil because of those external factors. For a simple example, we'll imagine that we are transporting this thing to a different location. Right? You know that farmers are going to farm these things and they are going to transport these things to a different location in order to sell it. So if the transportation process is not going to occur according to the technological methods, what will happen? Then these vegetables would get, right, they will get spoiled, right, mainly because of crushing. They will crush here, they will crush because of the movement of the lorry or any other distribution vehicle, and they will crush here and there, and after that what will happen? These vegetables and fruits will spoil. I mean, we won't be able to consume it upon crushing and going and here and there, right? We won't be able to eat it or consume it. If large amount of agrochemicals or any other pesticides or weedicides are being added excessively during the plantation process, so that also will be a problem. Okay, that also will be a problem. The fruit and the vegetables will not be able to grow as needed. Okay, sometimes they will grow and spoil after some time. Sometimes they will spoil at the younger stage. Okay, at young stage they will spoil. They won't be able to grow according to the needful amount, as per to the needful amount. So they won't be able to grow because of the usage of excessive agrochemicals and other different chemicals. So there are some external features also, external reasons also, because of there are some external reasons also which is going to help for the spoilage of food. Not only the action of microorganisms, but there are some macroorganisms who are going to help to spoil food, and also there are technological things. If these technological things haven't been followed correctly upon processing food, definitely, right, food will spoil, right? Even the packaged food items also getting spoiled if they haven't followed the same, I mean, like the original or the necessary technological steps. They haven't followed those things. Packaged food also might get spoiled. There is a probability. Okay, so there are several cases that's going to spoil food. Okay, so in this part we mainly discussed the methods which we can observe that the spoilage of food can happen right then. So from harvesting to market, they are subjected to bruises, cuts, lacerations, then squashes and bumped. Therefore, such food becomes unconsumable. So like I said, from market, so from field to the market, when the food items are going to transfer from field to the market, from paddy, let's imagine that from agricultural field to the market, we have to transport these things now. So upon transportation, they are subjected to bruises, cuts, right, then lacerations, then squashes, and for the bumps upon the transportation, right, mainly these things. So I told you earlier. So therefore, if these things are going to occur heavily to the food, what will happen? Such food becomes unconsumable, right? If you take tomato is very sensitive to squashes and cuts. Even by using our fingernails, we can cut it, as it is very soft. And if you drop down a tomato or well ripened tomato to the ground, then definitely it will squash. It will have different kinds of bruises, right? So those kinds of tomato will not be able to consume, right? Will not be able to consume at all. The taste is going to be differ 100% their taste is going to be differ, and we have to throw it away. So like that way, there are several, right? There are several issues. So these things are processing issues. So upon processing issues also, right, food may get spoiled, especially fruits and vegetables. Especially fruits and vegetables. Then, my dear children, it is given, as microorganisms readily act on such damaged food, they spoil fast. So I told you, main reason is the action of microorganisms. So upon squishing and having cuts and bruises, these will speed up the process of action of microorganisms, right? Having these things will speed up the process of spoilage. So that's the thing which is going to happen. External favorable reasons is going to fast, or it's going to accelerate the action of microorganisms on food. Because of that, definitely food will get spoiled very quickly. Okay, because of that, food will spoil very quickly. So my dear children, another point, the next point is given here. Let's see. The natural changes in food occur because of the action of various chemical substances such as enzymes present in them. It is called self-degradation. So natural changes in food occur because of the action of various chemical substances such as enzymes present in them. So it is called as self-degradation. If you take a fruit, okay, fruit or else a vegetable. Fruit or else a vegetable, my dear children. If you take a fruit, we'll take a fruit, a mango fruit. You know that mango fruit is going to ripe at a certain day. If you didn't consume that thing, if you are not going to consume it, then what will happen? Then it's going to mature. And this ripening process is also going to continue. So at a certain time, definitely that mango fruit will get spoiled. And you won't be able to consume it. Right? So this spoiling process also going to occur naturally. Naturally also this is going to occur. I mean, like fruits and vegetables especially, naturally are going to degrade. Gradually they are going to degrade if you are not going to consume it. So after the degradation, you won't be able to consume. So at the correct time, you have to consume it. If it is too much ripened, then you won't be able to consume. So fruits and vegetables mainly degrade naturally. They may degrade naturally also. Naturally also they are going to degrade. That is happening because of the enzymes and other chemical substances contained within the food. Here food means especially fruits and vegetables. As they are plants, right, plant types, as they are plant products, these also contain different types of chemical substances which is helpful to ripening process. However, day by day these enzymes are acting and day by day it's getting ripened. So at a certain date, we have to consume it. Otherwise, the ripening process will continue from day to day and we won't be able to consume it after a certain time period. So this process is referred as the self-degradation. Self-degradation. Self-degradation means naturally there is a possibility the food is going to spoil or unconsumable. Okay. So this is called as the self-degradation. So these are several reasons in which the food is not getting, in which the food is, the food that we use will get spoiled. Okay. So these are the several reasons behind the spoilage of food. So upon self-degradation also, my dear children, right? Because of the self-degradation also, a favorable environment for the action of microorganisms will develop, and food will, or the fruit and vegetables will get spoiled very quickly. Main action is because of the microorganisms, but those external factors like action of microorganisms, cuts, bruises and squashes, and also because of the self-degradation, like these factors are also going to accelerate the process of action of microorganisms. So by that way, the spoilage of food is also getting accelerated. Okay. So these are the main reasons behind the spoilage of food. Right then. So examples given for the self-degradation: maturation, then ripening and putrefaction of fruits. Mainly this is happening for the fruits and vegetables, right? Maturation and the degradation thing. Extra ripening process. So as you can see here, banana, if you keep it for a longer time period, this thing would occur. This black nature would come, blackish brownish nature will come, and you won't be able to consume, right? This is for the tomato. You won't be able to use tomato, right? It will become like this after certain time period. So this process is referred as the self-degradation. Right then. So you are given with the meaning of food preservation then. What kind of a thing is called then food preservation? What sort of a thing is called as food preservation then? So here it is given, different methods are applied to preserve food, and it will help to fulfill the nutrient requirement of man. So by preserving food, we can keep food for a longer time period now. So by that way, by consuming that food, preserved food, we can keep our nutritional level, or it helps to obtain our or keep our nutritional level, right? So my dear children, it's important to preserve food, and also it's also helping us to consume different types of food when we need it. So it's a very good advantage. Preserving food is a very good advantage. So what do you mean by food preservation then? See, the process of making food stay longer by artificially controlling the factors affecting the food spoilage is called food preservation. So food preservation means here artificially we are controlling the factors affecting the food spoilage, like mainly the action of microorganisms. Okay, mainly we are reducing the action of microorganisms by controlling the factors favorable for the microorganisms artificially. Okay, artificially we are, we are inhibiting the growth of microorganisms on food. By that way, we can keep that food for a longer time period. So food preservation means here we are going to save food by making unfavorable conditions for the growth of microorganisms. We do this thing artificially. Okay, so once again, the process of making food stay longer by artificially controlling the factors affecting the food spoilage is called as food preservation. So this is the one which is called as food preservation. Okay, this is the one which is referred as the food preservation, right? Food preservation. So food preservation is really simple, my dear children. What we are going to do here is we're going to take the food item and we are inhibiting the growth of microorganisms on that food item, and we are following different steps artificial steps in order to inhibit the growth. By that way, we can save that food item, or we can preserve that food item so that it will last longer time period. So this is what do you mean by food preservation in simple, right? This is the food preservation in simple. Right then. So during the food preservation, attempts are made to preserve the nutritional value and other characteristics of the food item. Following are the aims of food preservation. So my dear children, during the preservation of food, right? During the preservation of food, attempts are made to preserve the nutritional level or nutritional value and the other characteristics of the food item. So, upon preservation of food, first of all, we have to keep the nutritional level of the food item. It's useless if you can't keep the nutritional level at least up to the same level, or at least like 80%. At least like 80%. If not, it is, right? If not, it is not successful. I mean, we have to keep the nutritional level. The whole point of preserving food is consuming this food at a later time period. Why do we consume food? We consume food in order to get the optimum nutrition to our body. So if the food item, if the preserved food item do not have that nutritional level, optimum nutritional level, then it's useless to consume those things. So we have, upon preserving food, right, we have to consider how to keep the nutritional level up to a certain extent at least. So we have to make some attempts to keep the nutritional level upon preserving food also. Okay. Then the other factors are what? Their appearance, their taste, and those factors also be there, at least up to a certain level. So here, nutritional value and other characteristics of the food item should be preserved, right? Those things also be preserved. So following are aims of food preservation. So I told you that food preservation, right? Food preservation means keeping food for a longer time period. So what are the aims? Why do we need to keep it? Why do we need to preserve food? So we'll see the aims. Number 1, reduction of food spoilage. Food spoilage. This is the main reason of preserving food. Here we are reducing the spoilage of food. That's the main reason. To minimize the food spoilage. You know that spoiled food cannot be consumed. Spoiled food cannot be consumed. Food is a very valuable property. Food is a very valuable asset. So these assets must be saved. So in order to do that, we have to stop the spoilage of food. Okay, we have to stop the spoilage of food. So main aim of food preservation is to stop the spoilage and to save food as much as we can. Then the second one, prevention of food poisoning. Prevention of food poisoning. Food poisoning means sometimes if you eat food, those food will not be accepted by your body because of certain complications and certain chemical substances in it. Okay. So if so, your body is getting weakened by that food item. Weakened means your body is getting poisoned. So that simple process is referred as the food poisoning. So upon preservation of food, you can avoid the food poisoning as well. Then next one, usage of excess food, processing them to be used in off-season. That's a main advantage of or main aim of preserving food. Like I said earlier, if the food item, especially for fruits, if a certain fruit is only grown in a certain time period, then by saving or preserving that fruit item, we can consume it even within the off season as well. Okay. So my dear children, this is also a main reason of preserving food. What is that? We can consume the food item during the off season as well, if they are seasonal food items. If they are seasonal food items, then we can consume these food items even in the off season as well. So these are the main aims of preserving food. Main aims of preserving food. Right then, my dear children. So these are the main aims behind the food preservation. Okay, these are the main aims behind the food preservation. Okay then. So let's see what are the other contents in the lesson. So here you are given an activity. What is our activity then? Identifying preserved food from several food types. So identifying preserved food from several food types. Right. So here within this activity, we are going to use several food items. Okay. And we are going to identify what are the preserved food items from that list or from those food types. Preserved food types. Okay. You know that if the food item is preserved, I told you, then those things will not get spoiled. Those things will not get spoiled. You know, we can keep these preserved food for a longer time period. Okay. It will not get spoiled within a day or two. You can keep it for like at least a week. So we are taking different samples of food and we are observing, right? And we are observing what are the preserved food and what are the food which are not being preserved. So in order to do this activity, we'll be needing several food items. You can do this activity within home. It's a very simple activity, my dear children, right? It's a very simple activity. So here, you'll be needing these materials. Fresh milk. Fresh milk, right? Fresh milk. Then after fresh milk, right? Finding after fresh milk, if you can find out some sterilized milk as well. In normal terms, this is called as kalkiri, right? Sterilized milk. So I'll mention that thing as well. So fresh milk and sterilized. Fresh milk and sterilized milk. We'll be needing both of these things. So within the bottle, you can observe sterilized milk. This is just a fresh milk glass. Okay. Then we'll be needing dried spreads. Dried spreads. Then this is dried fish. Dried fish. This is dried jackfruit. Okay. Dried jackfruit. In singular terms, we refer this thing as atukos. Okay. Dried jackfruit. Then fresh fish. Fresh fish. This is, my dear children, lime pickle or salted lime. In Sinhala terms, we refer this thing as lurudehi, right? Lime pickle. Right? This is a bowl of rice. Bowl of rice. So these are the materials that we need. So not only these things, if you can find out different other food items as well. Remember to take several packeted food items also. Okay. Then what you have to do? Very simple. You take these food items and expose these things to the normal environmental conditions. Normal environmental conditions. Just keep it in the normal room or in outside. Right? Just keep it for a few time period. Right? Few hours. Just keep it for a few hours. Okay. Or else you can keep it for like 1 or 2 days. Then what do you have to do? After keeping it for about few hours or days, you have to observe their appearance, texture, odor, and other physical and internal and external properties. So by looking at those properties, you can come into a conclusion. What are the food items which are being preserved? And what are the food items that are not being preserved? And so on, right? So we'll go with the method then. We'll write down the method in how to conduct the activity. So it's really simple. What do you have to do, my dear children? Take each of the food item and expose to normal conditions. Take each of the food item and expose to normal conditions in the environment. Then observe each food item after few days. Or hours. So then finally what you have to do? You have to observe each food item after few days or hours. So it's if you are taking those above food items, then it's enough to keep like 1 day is really enough. Okay, 1 day is enough at all, right? You won't be able to keep it for several days. 1 day is enough. right? Few hours means here, if you can keep it like for about 12 to 13 hours, then that is also fine, no problem. You can keep it for like 12 to 13 hours, then that is also not going to be a problem, not going to be an issue at all. But don't keep it for about week or two, okay, right? Don't keep it for about week or two. Don't keep that much of time period, but however, within like 2 days at least, within 2 days at least, okay, that should be the maximum. 2 days is the maximum. At least 2 days you have to check and tabulate your answers. Okay, answers means you have to tabulate what has happened to the food item, right? The next step is very simple. Tabulate your observations according to the according to the table. So I'll show you the table. What is the table? So then this is the way of doing the experiment. So you have to take each of the food item and expose to the normal conditions in the environment. Then you have to observe each food item after few days or few hours. Then we have to tabulate our observations according to the table. So I'll show you the table. Table is very simple, my dear children. This is our table. So observation, the food item is given, food type is given, then the observation. What has happened to the food item? You just need to write down what has happened to the food item. Okay. What has happened to the odor, texture, appearance. That's it. Right. You just write it down. So we'll complete the table, my dear children. Actually, I'm not going to continue this activity at our laboratory. It's because this activity is really simple. You can just do it at your home. This is not that much of a big thing. So I'll just mentioning what will happen if you continue the activity, if you do the activity in correct manner. Okay. So we'll write down our observations then. What's going to happen over here? So as you know, my dear children, it's very easy to identify the spoilage process. So upon spoiling food, we know that their appearance, texture and all the other factors are going to change. So by using that special feature, we can identify what are the food items that are spoiled and what are the food items that are not being spoiled. So by that way we can come into a conclusion what are the food items which are being preserved and what are the food items which are not being preserved. Okay, right. So we'll write down one by one. Okay, first of all, we'll take fresh fish. Fresh fish. What is the observation? Observation is quite simple. Slimy nature can be observed, right? Slimy nature. Then bad odor can be observed. Slimy nature, bad odor, and specialty, other specialty is that their freshness has been disappeared. And my dear children, like when you keep your finger, right, it has a liquid or very slimy nature within the fish. Okay, so we'll write down our observations. Slimy nature. Then bad odor. Slimy nature and bad odor can be observed. Then fresh milk. Fresh milk. What has happened to the fresh milk? Fresh milk, my dear children, will turn into pale yellow color. So pale yellow color can be observed. And coagulation can also be observed. So milk has coagulated and pale color can be observed. And the other thing is that smell is also going to change. A bad odor is giving out. Okay, bad odor is also giving out. You do this thing at home, it's very simple activity, no? Right? So these are the observations. So we'll write down our observations. We'll write it as yellow color. It's good, no? Yellow color. Yellow color, coagulated, then bad odor. Right? Bad odor. Then the next one, rice bowl. Once again, you can observe a bad odor. And slimy nature. Right? So what are the other, let's see what are the other things given. So here, yes. Then we are coming into other things. What are the other things? Dried fish. Dried spreads. Dried fish. Dried spreads. Then there was two other substances. What are those two? Attucos. Okay, attucos. Then sterilized milk. Sterilized milk, which is also referred as kalkiri. Then, my dear children, there was another one. Lime pickle. Lunudehi. right? So dried fish was there, dried spreads was there, dried jack, sterilized milk, and lime pickle was there. Yes. So these are the ones. These are the other food items that could be observed in our list. So release the unnecessary parts here. Right. Okay. So what will happen to these things? Dried fish, dried spreads, dried jack or atukos, sterilized milk, and lime pickle, lunudehi. If you check the appearance of these things, right, and the, even you can taste it, there won't be any issue at all. Okay, if you check the appearance and the taste, right, and the smell, so you won't be able to see any kind of a difference in these things. It's because as these food items are, right, as these food items are, my dear children, these food items are, preserved. So I'll erase these things and I'll mention the observation first. By using one single column, I can mention the observation of this one. It's really simple, that's why. So here, just by a single column, I can mention like this. It's very simple. All of these food items, my dear children, do not change. These food items, all of these food items will not show a change. Why is that? Because dried fish, name itself is going to mention dried fish. We are drying fish by adding several salty items, salt especially, in order to preserve. So this is a preserved food item. We can keep it for a longer time period. Dried spreads, same thing. We add salt and we are going to dry it. So we can keep these things for a longer time period. Dried jack or atukos, same thing, right? We dried it and we are going to preserve it. So these things are preserved. We can keep these things for a longer time period. Then sterilized milk, same thing, right? Kalkiri, you can keep it for a longer time period. But however, kalkiri can be kept for about a week, right? Within a week or two, we have to consume it. That's why I told you that don't keep it for a longer time period. Just within one day, you have to observe and get the necessary observations. Then we have to keep it, those things in the necessary places. If you keep kalkiri for like 2 to 3 days, then you won't be able to consume it. You have to keep it in a refrigerator also. So there are certain conditions. But however, we can keep it for one day. No issue at all. For one day we can keep it. No problem at all. Up to like 12 to 13 hours we can keep it without any trouble at all. Right? But if you keep normal milk for about 12 to 13 hours, then these kind of things can be observed very clearly. Okay. So my dear children, sterilized milk is also a kind of a preserved food. So that we can keep it for a long time period. Long time period means in the sense, when you compare with the normal time period, which the normal milk is going to spoil, rather than that time period, we can keep it for a long time period. Okay, if the normal milk is going to spoil within 2 or 3 hours, then we can keep sterilized milk for about 13 to 15 hours. Okay, sometimes 2 to 3 days. If you keep the if you are going to give necessary conditions, then we can keep it for about 2 to 3 days as well. Okay, right. Then lime pickle, lunu dahi. So lime pickle, we can also keep it for a longer time period rather than the normal usual lime. It's because by adding salt, we have preserved these food items. So my dear children, it's quite obvious to us that preserved food stay longer time period, and these food items are preserved. What are? Dried fish, dried spreads, dried jack, sterilized milk, and lime pickle. These food items are preserved. So these preserved food items stay longer time period, right? They can be consumed within longer time period. Okay, preserved food. Then fresh fish, fresh milk, rice bowl, these things, right? If you want, you can take several fruits for this thing as well. So those things, my dear children, those things haven't been preserved. So because of that, those materials are spoiling very quickly. So preserved food are not getting spoiled quickly, but however, right? However, if the food item or if the foods are not being preserved, then those things are spoiled very quickly in the environment. So that's the conclusion that we can come into, from this activity. Okay, so we'll write down our conclusion, my dear children. Conclusion: dried fish, spreads, jack, then lime pickle, sterilized milk, So dried fish and spreads and jack or atukos, lime pickle and sterilized milk. All of these food items were preserved, right? These were preserved. How can we say that? Because these were not changed. Okay, these were not changed. However, my dear children, if you take, right, if you take fresh milk or fish, rice were not preserved. preserved because those got spoiled quickly. Right? So my dear children, this is the conclusion that we can take from the activity. What is that? Dried fish, dried sprats, dried jack or atukos, lime pickle, sterilized milk were preserved because these were not changed. These were not changed, right? Their texture, appearance or any other factor did not change at all. So we can say that these things were preserved. Then fresh milk, right? Fresh milk. Fresh milk, fish, rice were not preserved. These were not preserved because those got spoiled quickly. As these food items got spoiled quickly, right? These items were not preserved. So my dear children, we can come into conclusion that preserved food do not get in spoil, or they will not spoil very quickly. However, if a food item is not being preserved, then those will spoil very quickly. So that is the final conclusion we can come from this activity, right? So this is the easiest way to identify preserved food. You just expose it to the environment and observe whether these things are getting spoiled within a certain time period or not. Don't keep it for a longer time period, but keep it for like 1 day maximum. Then check whether these are getting spoiled or not. If these things are not getting spoiled, then definitely those should be preserved. Okay, if you can keep these things within in our normal environment for about for longer time period rather than the original ones, then definitely those things are preserved. Okay, so it's quite easy to find out preserved food apart from the normal food. Right then, so we'll see what are the other contents within the lesson. So from the observations, it is clear that in food items such as cow milk and fresh fish, the properties like color, odor and the texture change within few hours. So I told you that within few hours, right, within few hours, the change, their physical properties and also their internal and chemical properties are also going to change. Like fresh fish, fresh milk, right? These properties are going to change. But however, my dear children, but it can be seen that in sealed bottled milk, sterilized milk or kalkiri, atukos, dried fish, lunudehi and dried sprats, no observable change in properties such as color, odor and texture have taken place. So it is because those food items were preserved. Those food items are preserved. So these food items are preserved, my dear children. What are the food items that were preserved? Those dried ones and sterilized or sealed milk. These were preserved, right? So like I said in the earlier, this is how to identify preserved food items. Preserved food items. Right then. So in order to preserve food, mainly the factors causing the food spoilage should be controlled. Some measures that can be taken are as follows. So my dear children, mainly to preserve food, okay, to preserve food, in order to preserve food. Now, like in the dried fish and all the other preserved food item, what are the things that should be followed in order to do that kind of a thing? What kind of a thing? Preserve. So during the preservation of food, we have to follow different methods. Okay, we have to follow different methods. In each of these methods, we are reducing the growth of microorganisms. Okay, we are reducing the growth of microorganisms, action of microorganisms. So my dear children, in order to preserve food, mainly factors causing the food spoilage should be controlled. So in order to preserve food, we have to control the factors that is a causative agent or causative agent for food spoilage. Okay, first of all, we have to stop those things. Then some measures that can be taken are as follows. So we can take following measures to stop or to preserve food. What are the measures? Preventing microorganisms get into the food. Preventing microorganisms come in contact with the food item. We can prevent the microorganisms who are come in contact with the food item. So that sealed milk, by sealing it off, right? By sealing it off, what we are going to do here is we are going to avoid the contact of microorganisms with the milk by sealing it. Okay, by sterilizing and sealing it, we are avoiding the contact of microorganisms. Through sterilization, we are going to kill the microorganisms already inside the liquid or milk. By sealing it, we are going to stop the action of microorganisms who are going to come in contact with the external environment with the milk. Okay, so by that way we can preserve milk. So if you can stop the contaction of microorganisms with the food item, then you can stop the food spoilage. Just need to avoid the contact of microorganisms with the relevant food item. That's it. So you can cover it, you can dip it in sand. By doing that thing also, we are going to stop the action of microorganisms by avoiding their contaction between the food item and the microorganisms. Okay, so by sealing it also we can do the same thing, right? By dipping in several liquids like honey, oil, we can do the same thing, right? So this is how we can preserve food. Mainly we have to do what? We have to avoid the contact of microorganisms with the food item. Then the next one, controlling the temperature and water content to minimize the microbial activity on food. So my dear children, you know that optimum temperature and the moisture are the two main factors which are important for the growth of microorganisms. We learned this thing within our first lesson, right? Within our first lesson, during the action of microorganisms, we studied this thing. When we are studying about the action of microorganisms, we studied that moisture or water vapor and the optimum temperature, the normal room temperature, about 40 degrees of Celsius. Those are the most favorable factors for the growth of microorganisms. So if we can control these favorable factors, my dear children, we can stop the growth of microorganism on any kind of a place. So within food items also, if you can control those factors, then my dear children, what you can do? Then you can preserve food. Only thing that you need to do is control the action of microorganisms by controlling the favorable factors for their growth. Okay, by controlling the favorable factors for their growth, you can control the action of microorganisms. Okay, so this is the second one, number 2. Then number 3, third one, prevention of damage caused by macroorganisms. Prevention of damage caused by macroorganisms. So we can prevent the damage caused by macroorganisms by different kinds of animals like housefly. If you take milk and fish and meat, housefly is going to lay eggs, especially within meat and fish, and maggots are coming out after that. main reason for the spoilage of meat and fish. Action of microorganisms like housefly, right? Then if you take fruits and vegetables, same thing is going to happen. Houseflies, fruit fly, and all the other kinds of different insects are going to come, and they are going to, mainly lay their eggs or do any kind of other stuffs. Then by that way, these fruit items or vegetables are going to spoil. If you take rice paddy, right, rice paddy, or else green gram, pea, cowpea, those kind of things, right? Cereals, weevils are going to pierce these things down, and they're going to eat and consume. By that way, these cereal stuff also going to spoil. So by stopping those actions of macroorganisms also, we can prevent the food spoilage. We can prevent the food spoilage, my dear children. So these are the key points that we can follow to stop the spoilage of food. What are the key points? Preventing the action of microorganisms by avoiding the contact of microorganisms with the food item. Minimizing the action of microorganisms by controlling favorable components, favorable factors like moisture and temperature. Prevention of action of macroorganisms on food. Prevention of action of microorganisms on food. Examples: action of flies, house flies, fruit fly, insects and weevils. Okay. Right. So these are the methods that we can follow to stop the food spoilage, my dear children. Okay. By minimizing these things, or by, minimizing up to a certain extent, we can preserve food. We can't keep it for a longer time period, for like lifetime, but however, we can save food for about few days. Okay. So my dear children, there are modern methods as well as traditional methods for food, right? There are modern methods and as well as traditional methods for food. So we can use modern method and traditional methods for the food in order to do these kind of stuff. To do these kind of stuff, we can follow modern methods and traditional methods. Okay. So these are the main methods that we can follow, right? These are the main methods that we can follow to stop the food spoilage. So my dear children, let's see what are the traditional methods and those modern methods of food that can be followed to preserve. But however, we'll be discussing that thing within our next chapter.